usually gonna sing up here. Will it sound? It's different.
This is an unsightly.
Hi. Hello. Good evening. Thanks. Welcome to Christchurch Detroit tonight, and welcome and greetings to those of you joining from home. We are so glad to be together and glad to be connected. We are really excited and honored and grateful to have wonderful soloists with us tonight, a wonderful accompanist, and a big upgrade from last week. And Pastor Lawrence Rogers of Second Baptist Church, Detroit. Why don't you come out with us, Pastor Rogers? Yeah. So, welcome. We are neighbors.
That's right.
We're colleagues.
That's right.
We're friends.
Yes.
And it's just really great to have you here tonight and to hear from you, learn from you, learn about Second Baptist, and talk together about being church in downtown Detroit.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here. I want to thank you all for your hospitalities. Y'all have been so warm and hospitable. So I look forward to this event.
Great.
Yes.
Thanks. So, as you know, these evenings are shaped and focused around spirituals, and so, and not only that, not only singing and embracing music of our past, but how God is shaping us and calling us through music today. And so, Corinthia and Dorian have some beautiful spirituals to share with us tonight. Would you like to take it away? Sure. Cool. You and I can just...
Before I begin tonight, I'd like to point out our brand new piano, which I'm very excited about, but it hasn't been tuned yet. It was just delivered hours ago, so I do beg your forgiveness for the untuned piano.
His name so sweet, oh Lord,
Well, that was really beautiful. um, what were tell us the titles and composers. Tell us a little bit about what you just gave us.
Okay. So the first piece that I did was His Name's So Sweet.
It's on?
It's on-ish.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Oh no.
I can speak louder.
The light is on. How about now?
There you go.
Okay. Testing, 1, 2. All right. So the first spiritual that I sang was His Name's So Sweet, His Name's So Sweet, actually by Hall Johnson. And okay, yes. So it's by Hall Johnson. And actually, I had the pleasure of, before I get into the piece, I had the pleasure of doing the first Hall Johnson competition for the National Association of Teachers of Singing in 2000, I think that was 2016. And I won the first Hall Johnson competition nationally. So that was definitely an honor. And I made a little history. But I really enjoy this piece. One of my favorite opera singers is Leontine Price, and who is still living today and still singing today. And I really enjoy listening to her sing this piece. She really has a lot of fun singing it. And it just really just talks about loving God's name, you know, and knowing like how sweet His name is. And I think we all can just relate to how sweet God is to us and how sweet His name is. And the song is just really asking different ones, different leaders, do you love Jesus? The first one is post-sinner, where, most of us are sinners. All of us are sinners, but we try to live every day try to live holy or righteous, and, try to get better one more chance every day. And then it asks the class leader, do you love Jesus? And the elder, do you love Jesus? So it's really just like a type of, like a preaching type spiritual. And yeah, I just have fun singing it. Anything else you want to know?
It sounds like you had fun singing it.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think of the gospel story we heard a couple Sundays ago when Jesus and the woman meet at the well. And then she runs into town and tells everyone who she met and how he just got her and knew everything about her. So I was thinking about, I was picturing her as you were singing. I've just come from the fountain, and his name is so sweet.
Yeah, I believe to me, the fountain is just like learning what God can do for you and preaching to others what he can do for them and just acknowledging how good he is to you. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great answer.
No, stand here.
Oh, stand over. Sure. The piece that I sang was the spiritual Deep River, which is also the title of this series. I figured we'd close it out with, I had to throw it in there somewhere. No one sang it in the 3 weeks that we've done this. That arrangement is by a young composer from the city of Detroit, and his name is Brandon Spencer. Most recently, tomorrow he is going to Carnegie Hall to premiere. He was commissioned by Lawrence Brownlee, who is one of the world's leading operatic tenors, to write a piece for him for his recital series, and he's a Detroit native, and also me and Corinthia's best friends since like middle school. And but he's an amazing composer and arranger, and I'm literally one of his muse to perform all of his pieces. So I was very excited to present that today. I think that with Deep River, I think it's definitely a piece that to me feels like a sermon, and trying to, for lack of better words, win over the listener. Especially in the second section where it asks a question. It asks, don't you want to go to that gospel, that promised land that we are all promised at the end of this journey called life? And I think that Brandon does an amazing job at catching the a nostalgic, almost bittersweet kind of feeling that comes with the thought of one day we all are going to cross over into that promised land. So I think that piece, I really love you can feel the river in the right hand of the piano. You can really feel the push and the pull of the water, and by the time it gets to the second section and the question, it relaxes, because I feel like the composer wants to really catch your attention with not only the music, because he writes such beautiful piano music and vocal lines, but really hone in onto the question that the performer is asking. So that's why I did that piece.
I'm so glad.
Yes. Good answer. Good money.
So you can hang on to those or give it to Ed. Do you want to jump in?
Ed?
No, you're good. Pastor Rogers, do you have any questions of the singers or anything come to mind?
I just really, I have been blessed richly by hearing you all's voices tonight. I'm truly blessed, so thank you.
Thank you.
As I reflect on your remarks about Deep River, that is actually new to me. I haven't heard that before. But one thing I know about the spirituals is that there's a dualism in them. There's a yearning for the sweet by and by, but also a practical dimension of what we need right now. I'm curious as you talk about the promised land and getting there, and as you have studied the lyrics way beyond what I have, because I just heard it now, do you think that the promised land and the deep river could have had a connection, since the writers from Detroit, to the Detroit River and the promised land to Canada, crossing the border, that once I can cross this deep river, I can become free? Do you think there's a dualistic meaning there?
Absolutely. I think that with every spiritual, there is some form of dualistic meaning. So many of the texts were written in code so that while they were singing them amongst one another, because, everyone was so happy, oh, go ahead and sing those songs. And they just, to them, they sounded like field work, but they were coded languages and coded messages about, what was the next step or the next move, because, there was moments where slaves were leaving, slaves were running away, and with the text, it makes so much literal sense. To me, I'm a lover of movies and lover of undertones and text and poetry and stuff, and I think that the genius behind just saying straight, like, a river, and just mentioning a river immediately, and there's so many other spirituals that are, follow the drinking gourd, follow the North Star, where they literally are saying, yeah, like directions, So I think that it definitely, and Deep River specifically, has so much duality because it also can relate the river to life in general, and just crossing over your everyday trial and tribulation.
That's right. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Not quite yet. So, Pastor Rogers, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to Second Baptist. You're recently there, the past couple of years, right?
Yes, 2 years.
And I think they need us to speak up a little.
Oh, sure. Yes. My name's Pastor Lawrence Rogers. Yeah. Are you all able to hear me? Okay. All right. If I start talking too much louder, I may just be carried away to start preaching, so try to keep a cool voice, keep myself under control, Yes, my name's Pastor Lawrence Rogers, and I'm the 24th pastor of Second Baptist Church of Detroit. I moved to Detroit by way of Baltimore, Maryland, where I served in ministry for 7 years. Worked for church there. We had a very earthy, very practical ministry where we were committed to service to homeless, people who struggle with literacy, also, and that's both reading literacy, but also folks who English was their second language. So we help immigrant populations learn how to speak English, as well as also parishioners and people in the community who never really became strong at reading, to grow in their skills in a confidential way, because a lot of people, they are embarrassed to not know how to read. So we would promise them confidentiality, and many people went through that. We did a lot of gardening, a lot of community gardening, and developed a network of community gardens at churches that were in food deserts, and also had nutrition programs, and human trafficking, amongst other things. Where we were in Baltimore was a hub, so we would train the community on how to protect children from being brought into or kidnapped and put into that life, and also to know how to spot a person that's been trafficked and understand if they are asking for help and how to get them the proper help. So we did a lot of that kind of work. I was there for 7 years, and then now I'm originally from North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. But I felt the call after serving in Baltimore for 7 years. I felt the call that God was leading me somewhere else. And after a lot of prayer and discernment, that somewhere else was here in Detroit. And when I first moved to Detroit, I moved here in November 2020. And everything was shut down, and I just thought, wow, this place is very antisocial, But as things began to open up, I remember calling home to my parents and say, Michigan reminds me of North Carolina in the north. You know, this reminds me a lot of home. It reminds me of what I'm kind of used to. This area is really warmed up to me. And I love it a lot in the summer. Absolutely. So that's a bit about me. And you know, being here, being located downtown, you know, one thing that I'm motivated is continuing to do the work that Second has done historically, but also bringing some of the earthy ministry that I've done in other places here as well. We've already started some of that. You know, we've done human trafficking seminars since I've been here. We've had a financial literacy for children because Frederick Douglass once said it's easier to build a whole child than to repair a broken person. So you figure if we can get the child young and kind of teach them these sort of principles, they can carry it with them throughout life. We also have had a STEM program as well where, you know, unfortunately, for a lot of underprivileged young people, they are not getting exposure to the marketplace of tomorrow, which will be a lot of STEM jobs, coding and cybersecurity, engineering, mathematics, and things like this. But in more affluent areas, these types of things are in the curriculum. So we decided to have a special program where we had an engineering program for the young people, and every young person could come, they didn't have to pay, and every young person left building their own robot. They were very, very happy with that, and their parents were quite impressed with them going home for a robot that they built. And so we're going to be doing that again in a couple of months as well. And so, you know, we're interested in continuing to do those sorts of things. So that's a bit about who I am and where I've been. So
Beautiful. Did you mention once that you are an engineer as well? You have a background in engineering?
no, I did well. Not that kind of engineering.
Oh.
I used to work in recording engineering.
Oh.
So I'm digging the acoustics in here. Yeah.
Has that background come in handy for you at all
Oh
lately?
yes, I mean, absolutely. For some reason, it seems like every church I've served in has needed a bit of retooling of their media ministry. So the skills that I've learned spending time doing recording engineering has really been a blessing to churches that I've worked with. You know, and it's been extremely helpful during this pandemic, where some churches, for the first time in their history, are now introducing live stream, and then not only that, unprecedented, having live stream only services. So it was helpful to have those skills, and so it was not only a blessing to the church I was at in Baltimore. It's been helpful at Second, but also other churches have asked me to help them, and you know I'm very sad for all of the pain and grief we've gone through in the pandemic. But one thing that I'm glad to see is that churches have now decided to enter into the digital space because that's where people are. I think about when St. Paul went into Athens, right, and he used the things there to talk about the gospel with people.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to go to Athens, right? And to me, Athens is the digital world. We've got to be willing to embrace it. Yeah. And so COVID kind of gave a lot of churches the nudge they needed to go into that space where people are. You know, where people are. Seems like more people are engaged in the virtual space than they are in actual reality. And so the gospel has to be preached there as well.
Yes. Yeah. Amen. And I'm smiling because there's a number of us here who worked for years setting up for live stream. I can't believe it was only not even a year ago that we got our live stream started. Because not to read too much into any layers of metaphor, but in this historic, gorgeous building, there was not the capacity for the increased internet or increased electricity required for live streaming. And so it did take us a couple of years. And that building and building up was critical, and it takes a long time, right, to do really important work, but that shouldn't detract any of us or anyone from setting out in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing how, I mean, I think I don't think you all are alone in that. I think there was churches that struggled. But what I find to be amazing is how God put so many pieces together. You know, how when folks stepped out and said, okay, we're going to do this thing, things kind of came together and lined up, you know, and so that it could eventually happen for them. So,
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about then the history of Second Baptist, and then we will get ready. We'll shift back into to hear your next couple of pieces, and then we'll also be talking about our history and our future, and how both, including the present, are real all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then as we step closer to Holy Week and Good Friday, how are pain and joy, how are death and life present always? So we'll get into that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Second and its history?
Yeah, sure. So similar to this beautiful church, Second Baptist is a historic congregation. It was established in 1836, which means that it is 1 year older than the state of Michigan itself. That's when they filed the charter. They started gathering actually in 1835, but they filed their charter in 1836. It was 13 self-determined, some formerly enslaved, other free black people who got together and decided to establish a church. Before they did that, they were meeting at First Baptist, which used to be located in Detroit, but now it's located in Southfield. And there was some problems. This is a common story, but there were some problems with how the black parishioners were being treated. And they did not believe that in the church they should be treated like second-class citizens. And so they decided to go and start their own congregation, and that was the beginning of Second Baptist. From Second Baptist's very beginning, there was a pastor there by the name of William Monroe. There's another businessman who was at the church whose name was George T. Baptiste. From Second Baptist's very, very beginning, they were committed to social justice. During the beginning of the church, one of the greatest social injustices was the American slave trade. And so, when we face these sort of injustices, we kind of have to make a decision of how we want to respond to it. Okay? Do we want to stick our heads in the sand? Do we want to take risks to show the love of Christ? Do we want to be the custodians of God's justice in the world, right? And so Second decided to be that, the former. Mm-hmm. And Second was considered one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad. You can visit our congregation, you can take a tour, you can go see in the basement what was done, where people were actually hid, and we would hide them in our basement. And we had a wagon with a false bottom. And we would put people in the wagon, and we would try to get them to that deep river. And once we got to the deep river, George T. Baptiste had a steamboat, and we would put them in a steamboat and get them across the river. Now, this was illegal. There was a time when Michigan was a free state, but due to the Fugitive Slave Act, if you were in Michigan and you were caught, you would be sent back into slavery. If anybody was caught helping you or hiding you, they would get fined $1,000 and also face years in prison. Now, $1,000 is like a lot of money today. Like, I do not want a $1,000 fine.
Right.
That would be a major bummer for me.
Yeah.
But it was a whole lot back then. You can consider, like, you could go grocery shopping with like a quarter. You can go get like all your groceries, with change. You get all your groceries. So you think about how much $1,000 really was back then. So you consider that was for helping one enslaved person. But Second Baptist did it 5,000 times. helped to free some 5,000 formerly enslaved people. Second Baptist was also a part in the labor struggle. Of course, we know the story of Henry Ford, but Henry Ford, early on, was not hiring black Americans. And so we had a pastor by the name of Reverend Bradby who developed a relationship with Henry Ford and was able to leverage Ford to start hiring black Americans, which sparked the great migration of black Americans from the South, from states like Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, coming up. Basically the same corridor that was used for the Underground Railroad, obviously. Some of the same paths were coming up to Detroit for those jobs. Many were leaving fields, sharecropping, and working in farms to come to Detroit for jobs in the automotive industry, of course, making the famous $5 a day. Some of the jobs that they got were some of the most unfavorable jobs, but nonetheless, they were still, good-paying jobs. And when they came, they went to the church that helped them to get this job. So Second Baptist grew, became a huge congregation, a big church. And second, what helped the migrants? When they would come, they would sleep in the building. Would help them with toiletries. Would help them with clothes. If you got a letter of reference from Bradby, it was easy for you to get a job at Ford. So many people would come through programs at Second and kind of show their character to Reverend Bradby so they could get those jobs. And then, kind of fast forward in civil rights. We had a pastor by the name of Reverend Banks. I have a connection to Reverend Banks. I'm fond of him because he went to Howard.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, way back in the day. And I also am a Howard grad. So, we had that connection. And Reverend Banks had a connection. He was friends with Reverend King Sr. So he would invite Reverend King Sr. to come speak at Second Baptist, and Reverend King Sr. would bring his son, and Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., before he was a reverend.
Yeah.
And so Second had this relationship with the Kings. In fact, Reverend Dr. King, when he began his ministry and civil rights, he came to Second Baptist to fundraise for the Montgomery bus boycott. And he said that Second Baptist raised more money for the Montgomery bus boycott than any other church. He went to raise money. So, Second has this long, rich history. But, tonight I think I'm also here to talk about the history around Underground Railroad. A lot of exemplars came through Second during that time. Frederick Douglass came. Before John Brown went out and on this, what I call his revolutionary journey, John Brown stopped by and spoke to Second members. So many people on the Underground Railroad would come through Second Baptist. And even fast forward to people like Ralph Bunche, the first Nobel Peace Prize winner. The first black Nobel Peace Prize winner was baptized at Second Baptist. Carter G. Woodson, we just got finished celebrating Black History Month. It started as Negro History Week when Carter G. Woodson wanted to, introduce this. He came to Second Baptist and visited and talked about his plan for having a Negro History Week. So Second has been, a part of every single freedom struggle, I like to say, that affected the black community for 187 years, And so now we're here now facing modern day issues such around mass incarceration, around fair policing, around economic empowerment. Okay, we're facing those issues today, and we're just continuing on with that mantle around social justice and bringing Jesus to the public square.
Yes. Amen. And beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, I can't wait to talk more. We need to hear from Dorian and Corinthia. hard to talk after. Wow. Well, Corinthia, you've had a little bit of time to breathe and rest. So why don't you tell us first about what you brought?
Yeah, sure. So this is an arrangement of the spiritual Glory on My Soul. I'm sorry. I can't even see it. But yes, this is an arrangement of I Got a New Name and Glory on My Soul. So it's kind of like together. But this piece is arranged by Colin Lett. And actually, I have, this is my, these last few months, I've been studying two of his pieces, which were recommended to me by his fraternity brother, who's a part of Phi Mu Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And when he sent me this, first of all, when I didn't reach out to him until after his frat brother reached out to him, and I was just like, "Hi, I'm Corinthia. I would like to sing one of your pieces." I only asked for one, but he ended up sending me more. And he was, I guess he was a fan of mine. He told me, you know, "Oh, I've been listening to you for a long time," so he sent me some more music, so that's pretty cool. Special privileges. But anyway, so when he sent this to me, he told me his interpretation of like the whole thing of him writing the song, writing the music, and how he pictured everything. So I I painted my own picture or wrote my own little story of that can be relatable to the piece. So in the beginning, you hear this beautiful, what you call interlude? Intro? Yes, intro, intro to the song, and you hear this sound, this slow glory, glory, glory on my soul, and when I hear that, I think of that as like a transition, like someone is transitioning into death but life. And I thought of it like your grandmother or whoever that's passed away, and they're telling you, you know, as they're laying in the bed, and they're telling you, "Hey, it's going to be okay. I'm going on to glory. I'm going to be all right. I'm going to, you know, to my home." And I feel like this is that part when everybody's crying and, "Oh, I'm going to miss you," you know, when you deal with, you know, the grieving and everything. And then after when I sing that lower part, that glory, that part, that's the part where she's gone, or that person is gone, on to glory. And so when I come in with the octave higher, with the same thing, this is me, this is the person at the gates, walking into the gates and seeing how heaven is. The streets are paved with gold. I don't have to cry anymore. There won't have to be any death anymore, you know? And so I'm seeing all of these beautiful things in heaven. I'm just walking around. Then God shows me my new home, and you hear that bum, 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 bum. He gave me a new name. I got a new home. So those are the things that I'm like thinking about as I'm singing. I could do a better job at like expressing that, but this is what I'm thinking while I'm singing. I'm doing better. But yeah, so this is what I'm, you know, thinking and everything. So after that, when he comes back in with that slower glory, glory, don't you wanna go? At this point, I'm kind of just ministering to you in the spirit. So that's how I feel about the piece. And I feel like during the slavery times, you know, actually, this piece is sort of biblically, not sort of, but it is biblically. But I feel like they kind of use those, the scriptures about heaven, they use those as also as messages, you know, during slavery. And I think it also goes back into the deep river, crossing over into the promised land, and knowing that there's a better place. You know, I'm on this journey, I'm trying to get there, but there's a better place. And even if something happens to me, If I end up getting tortured, if I end up dying from, being beaten and all of these different things that was going on, I know that there's a place where I don't have to worry about this anymore. So that's how I felt about the piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinthia. And be assured that what you've just said, what you're thinking about, comes through in your singing. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it brought tears to my eyes. I was annoyed because my lyrics was all high. And it was just a lot.
I saw you dropping your eyes.
I'm
Yeah.
like, okay.
Just the FYI, Doreen has made me cry quite a few times when you sing.
Yeah, but no, I just.
Payback time.
Right. No, I think she really described that piece. I think that to go. I'm sorry. I was going to say there's so many similarities with Deep River and that the text of that piece. So I thank you for noticing those similarities. I just performed a arrangement. I wanted to say before I started, I was like, this one isn't as happy as that one that we just heard. It's not as happy sounding as that one. It's a little more gritty, but that was Talk About a Child by Dr. Diane White, who's an African-American woman composer and music educator, and I think she has a degree in Oregon, and I said, oh my God, we have to do this with Oregon, because the score is actually written for tenor and organ, and I was very excited to do it. I think that that's one of a spiritual that is another declarative spiritual that is to the audience and also to oneself, and honestly to encourage one when those times are hard, those times are super hard, and a little a little back rub might not do it. You might have to really pull yourself up by your bootstraps and to meet God halfway. And I think that song and the way that the composer and the arranger said it, there's so many, I don't know if you could feel, but there was this very undertone in the belly of just storm-like chaos almost, and you can really feel it. And there's so many switches of meters in the piece, and meters is where it goes from, maybe you're just going 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 3, 2, 4 to whatever, to a hemiola, if you know what that means. But there's 7, 8, there's so many different meters, but I think that captures the storm that the narrator or preacher and singer in that moment is trying to relay that message, not only to themselves and to whoever they're speaking to, but you have to hear that over the level of discomfort you may be in that moment when you need to encourage oneself. So I think that is one of those spirituals that felt that way, and I think that as we learn how, just with, for example, the history of Second Baptist, spirituals were birthed in those times too. They all weren't coding for necessarily getting, some of those were church songs, and they've become spirituals to us because of the stoicness and the age of them, but some of those were just songs that they sang to each other in church, at the camp meetings, in the backyards. And we know we were dealing with a time where you couldn't just come together and be yourselves. So I think that we need to take that into account as well, that there were moments where these songs were just for one another and to encourage oneself and to encourage, of course, your neighbor, brother, sister.
It's nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to take just a few more minutes. The bells that just rang told us it's just 8 o'clock.
Okay.
But if we can indulge and take just a few more minutes, because I want to hear from you. Both of these selections actually made me think about, as you talked about, death but life, and the transition, and the tumultuous and simultaneous emotions. Makes me think a lot about Good Friday.
Yeah,
And our churches are approaching Good Friday.
that's right.
Tell us about Good Friday at Second Baptist.
Absolutely. Before I do, could I reflect on?
Please.
I'm-
And is your mic on?
Yes, it's on. Yes. First off, I just feel like, man, I would certainly pay for tickets to hear the songs I've heard tonight. This is wonderful, and both the pieces were amazing. What I appreciate about your piece is the change of pace. You know, I really felt it. It just took me from one place to the other. You know, and then your range is just amazing. My goodness. And then with the piece that you sung, I really appreciate what you said about it, because to me, there was a sociological critique in the song, and maybe that critique is the word, but there was a sociological reflection in the song, because there was this amazing job on the organ as well. And wow, those dissonance chords that were being played at the same time we're talking about good Jesus. To me, that song really represents a lot of the black experience in America, especially during enslavement. You have this faith in Jesus, which is bringing you through that piece, but the chords are not comfortable. What you're going through in life is not comfortable, it doesn't feel good, you know, but you believe in good Jesus is going to come and help you. And I mean, to me, that is, you know, this is a great segue into talking about Good Friday. I think that, you know, the beautiful part about Jesus Christ is that the message of Christ, it will take on a different expression for different cultures. In the black community, it has always been a correlation between Jesus dying on the cross of Calvary and Mike Brown laying in the street. There's always been that connection. There's always been a connection between Jesus dying on the cross of Calvary and my relative, my son, my father, my mother being hung from a cruel tree. There's always been that connection. And so, like, when you read and hear the story of Jesus, and you hear about how he was innocent but yet beaten, and innocent and yet flogged, and then the state, like literally the government, at the hands of the government, they nail him to the cross, they dies and he suffers. It's always sent a message to the black community that dealt with enslavement, dealt with Jim Crow South, dealt with racial terror, dealt with terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, dealt with all of this stuff, and seen people. There's a black theologian by the name of Jim Conner wrote a book called The Cross and the Lynching Tree, and he makes this comparison. He tells the story of a woman named Mary Turner. Mary Turner was upset. This is a true story about her, and for just a trigger warning. The story is graphic, and so if you have dealt with abuse or can be easily triggered, maybe you can turn the sound down, or maybe I give you a moment to step out. But Mary Turner was a woman whose husband was lynched over nothing, and she protested it, and they took her and lynched her too. She was pregnant, and they cut the baby out of her, and then they put the baby on the ground and they stomped on the baby in front of her while she was hanging to death. So you think about a person that believes in Jesus Christ, believes in God, yet you have just experienced this. This has just happened to your relative, to a person that you love, and you just experienced this. That's your song. That's what you just sung. And so, you know, Good Friday, we call it Good Friday, but it's really terrible, because you feel lost. You know, we know this story. We know, but on that third day, you know, he rose. We know the story. But then they didn't know. They just knew this horrible thing that just happened to the rabbi, to the person they followed around for 3 years, to the person that raised their brother from the dead, to the person that healed them, that cured their illness, that cured their blindness, that helped the person that was 38 years of immobility be able to move again. This person who you love so much, who you cried out, Hosanna, Hosanna for, you celebrated, has now, for no reason except bringing you hope, has been murdered at the hands of the state. So Good Friday gives us a moment to kind of sit in that tension. And I think Good Friday is important in this age, because in this age, we love the praise, but we hate the lament, right? You turn on the Christian station, and most of the songs are like praise, 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 high beat, high pace, praise, praise, praise. But where are the lamentations? The Exodus says that it was out of the collective lament of the people that God rose up Moses. So the people were collectively crying out in lament, right? So there's something that is off when we have so much injustice around us, but we feel like we are allergic to lament. So like Good Friday gives us a space for lamentations. It gives us a space to sit in the reality of today.
Yes. What does Good Friday look like at Second Baptist then? How does Second sit in the lamentation?
Thank you. So this year we're having a special program, and we're having what's called a 7 last word service. And so the 7 last word service are the 7 last words that we see that Jesus spoke on the cross of Calvary. Okay, so such as, woman, behold thy son, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Today you'll see me in paradise. I'm getting them all out of order. Today you'll see me in paradise. But all these statements, there's 7 of them. And so what the 7 last word service is that we take 7 speakers, and each speaker offers a reflection on each set of words. It's very meaningful. It's deep theology. And to me, it always brings me closer to the Lord, having that service. And this year, I would like to thank Christ Church officially for allowing us to borrow your dynamic and wonderful pastor to be one of the 7 speakers for this last word service.
I'm very humbled and honored by the invitation. Very humbled that you thought of me, and really honored by the opportunity. And I'm really honored by you being here tonight, so that we could hearing from you and getting to know you, hearing some of Second's story. So on Good Friday, we have services here at 12 and 7. At the 7 o'clock service, our choir is present, and the service is mostly music. And this year, the focus is on working with portions of Handel's Messiah. As you know, in previous years on Good Friday, the music has really been more in the present moment, hasn't it? And how do the life and the death that we witness and live and experience, what is Jesus' life and death and resurrection?
That's right.
In the midst of everything. Our 12 o'clock service is a bit more by the book. It is literally by the book, with our prayers and readings that are traditionally said on Good Friday. I won't be at that service as I will be over at Second Baptist, but I believe that I'm somewhere in the middle of the 3-hour 7 last word service. So the opportunity is before you to come to Second Baptist for the 7 last word service, which is 12 to 3. Come here at noon and then walk over or take a short drive over to Second Baptist, or be here in the evening, or any combination thereof. There's you've just lifted up for us how much meaning and critical meaning there is to experience on Good Friday.
Absolutely. So you all are most certainly welcome to join us. The 7 speakers that we have all come from 7 different churches around the city, and these are some dynamic thinkers. So one of the criteria was they had to be able to, have a energizing conversation with me. So everybody was able to do that. And so,
We never have an energizing conversation.
all
I don't
the
know
time,
what you're talking about.
all the time. And so they were all able to do that. And so I encourage you. They're all very thoughtful, and I think every last word will be meaningful. It's an ecumenical service. It's a co-ed service. I think it will be a real blessing. So.
Well, thank you for the blessing that you are. Thank you for blessing us with your presence and your words tonight. Thank you, Dorian and Corinthia and Ed, for blessing us with your music and your words tonight. And thank all of you for making Deep River a part of your Lenten experience. This concludes our 5th season, and thank you for making it what it is. Have a good night.